what we know about the creation of the universe. What I find interesting in this chapter is when the spirits come to Kardec and answer him that, well, it's by God's will. That's one of the expression. And he says, or the spirits say, that they find it beautiful the way it's written in Genesis, the book from the Bible, when they say that God said, let there be light, and light came.
The way the universe came to being, as described in the book of Genesis in the Bible, you might use it as a bit of an allegory and as a bit of a guideline, but it's very dangerous to interpret it literally. And the Spirit's book is very clear about that. You should not interpret it literally.
When the spirits answer the question by saying that they believe and they can affirm to us that this expression from the Genesis is a good expression to express how the universe came to be, let there be light, and then light arose, light came. I find that I could say like a succinct explanation of how Spiritism sees the power of God.
Everything that happens in the universe is according to the will of God. So yes, the Bible is an allegory of the creation that uses some liberties with the understanding that they had at the time. Spiritism doesn't come to contradict the Bible. It comes to explain to us what was in the Bible, what is in the Bible, to separate what is fantasy created by the human mind to the reality of the teachings that we receive from the superior spirits that are there in the Bible, in the Gospels.
The Spirit's answers in the Spirit's book about how the worlds or the universe was created, it doesn't give a lot of specific information. What it does say, though, is that that God created the universe, that there was some kind of force that created the universe that had an intent to it, that it didn't just happen by random, and that the way that the universe is developed is not necessarily random.
For Spiritism tells us that we should always follow science. If science finds anything that goes against the Spiritist teachings, we should stay with science and change Spiritism. According to science, Earth, the universe was created with the Big Bang.
These days, many scientists believe that the universe is somewhere around 13 billion years old, that our planet is somewhere around 4.5 billion years old, and so forth. There's a lot more information that we have today than at the time that the Spirit's book was created, starting in 1857.
Now, God is eternal, has no beginning, no end, the Creator. Everything comes from the Creator. Science is stuck at this understanding of where does it come from. Science starts from the Big Bang and doesn't know where to go before the Big Bang or how to go forward after, eternity, let's say.
But one also has to realize, I think, that many scientists do believe there's a lot of randomness in the way that the world was created. And one of the big arguments going on these days is, in terms of the origins of the universe, how it developed and everything, is it purely random? Is there an intent behind it? Is it God's intent? In what way has that happened? Spiritism believes that there was intention of some kind.
How Spiritism sees the creation of the universe by God's will. We still don't know exactly how it is. It is tough to really say that the Spiritism has a definite or a definitive, a complete answer to that question. We have to resort up to this moment. Our minds are still not able to completely grasp that creation.
The Spirit's book also did not give specific information at that time as to how old the universe might be. In fact, it says, predict or speculate on the actual age of the universe is just speculation.
When we say, oh, God created the universe, God did not work alone. It is interesting for us to think about this, because when we say, oh, God did this, God did that, it is as if there's this person or this being that had all the power and used or employed nobody else to do anything else. So God, it's the initial flame. It's the one that gives us this this flow of energy for us to work. And then after creating maybe the first ones who we don't know who they are or what they are, they come and they start working together to put this all together, to put like all these lights that are coming to all of us.
So Spiritism come to help us understand that the creation is infinite, that we have spirits everywhere, that all worlds are inhabited by spirits, including the stars. Now, not necessarily incarnated spirits, but there are spirits everywhere.
We have so many, there are so many so many spirits, so many other beings that helped and still help God to control or to govern, to use their powers to together with one another put this universe together, like creating us building blocks here and there.
I think that in Genesis you have some informations about the creation of the universe and the creation of the worlds, but it is Genesis, because of the time that it was written, where our availability of understanding of science was still limited, it also went just a little further on what we could understand.
I imagine Kardec at Kardec's time. So you see something in the sky and you don't know how to study it. You don't know how to see it. You don't know how to understand what's going on. This is something that people usually call miracles. Oh, this is a miracle from whatever it is. So Kardec asks specifically about our comets, that sparking of that collects everything that will one day become a new planet or will one day become a new something. And the spirits say, yes, but they don't say it as if it's the only thing that will become or that can become.
Spiritism believes that God is the force behind the creation of our planet.
And Kardec goes into, and he says, what we can tell from what the spirits are telling us is that God works with the laws that He created. So God created laws, and those laws need to be obeyed, because if God created those laws, those are perfect laws. Those are laws that are intended to be used, not intended to be broken.
What we know from Spiritism, from science, is that God is creating at all times, never stops creating. And understanding that everything is in motion, we understand that spirits are being created at all times, and universes, worlds, and everything are being created at all times.
And then the worlds are created based on these laws. The law of gravitational pulls, the law of inertia. Everything that physics study today and discover are laws that govern the universe. So for a planet to be created, for life as we know it here, to be created in a planet, certain conditions need to be met.
Also, everything has a cycle. The Earth was created some 4.5 billion years ago and will cease to exist in another 3 to 4 billion, if I'm not mistaken.
Together with creation, there's this destructive pattern. But we can call it destruction, or we can call it the beginning of a new construction. That's why I like the word renewal, because it's the renewing of what is old that needs to give place to a new thing. For a new planet or for a new system to be born, to have better capabilities, to have better ways of providing life, new life forms, old ones need to perish. And then they will die, and they will be new stuff that will grow from that old stuff that was dead.
The Spirit's book says that when the time came for certain life forms to develop on our planet, that's when they occurred. Before that, they were considered latent. That's how it describes it. It gives an example of a seed, for instance. A seed can sit as a seed for a long time, but then when the right combination of interactions occur that make it develop, then that's when it happens.
They say that life has a way of being there, but it needs to be met with certain specific conditions for it to come to life. And they, in the Spirit's book, they even mention this idea of, these seeds that become dormant for thousands of years, and then all of a sudden you put it on the ground and life is there. It's sprouting again. How come life came to this planet? From the stardust. I love this expression. Life coming from the dust from the stars.
Well, what the Spiritist book emphasizes, and again, its point of view was based upon what was known back then, 1857, 1858, is that it seriously doubted that human beings only existed 4,000 years before Christ, and that Adam was the first person on the planet. So Spiritism and the Spiritist book is really questioning all that. It says it pretty much is a myth.
We started our evolution as a spiritual principle, or like we say in our studies, as a monad, and we start learning all these associations with nature, with the elements, particles, vegetables, animals, until we reach the stage that we can be called a spirit, right? When we start to learning to achieve free will and intelligence, and we have choices. Now, we spend billions of years, we are here on Earth as individual spirits for around 400,000 years, right? So before that, we had 4 billion years to go through the other stages as not still as an individual spirit.
So we have then the very small animals, or not animals, we wouldn't call them animals, like the amoebas and the protozoa, and then they would start doing their things, living, which is just basically breathing. When all these conditions were met, all these small pieces of life were combining, and then we were growing and growing and growing, and after millions of years, then we have all these different types of life forms.
But Earth is evolving, right, with us. We couldn't have inhabited Earth for the first 4 billion years because the conditions, the climatic conditions, the changes were so abrupt that we couldn't survive. Everything that we learn of the history of Earth is the evolvement of the planet and the evolvement of ourselves. All these, you can see the evolution of Earth and of us as spirits going through the different stages until we could come together and start using the earth as our planet of existence, of incarnations.
So I find it very interesting the way Kardec puts it. He says at one point, people tend to believe or tend to think that, because science shows us that God didn't create the world in 6,000 years, this makes God less than what God is. To me, Kardec says, it makes God even bigger, makes God even more wonderful, because God said, okay, I'm going to create these laws and everything will work perfectly with these laws. So now we see the laws, but God at one point he said, oh no, I created these laws, but I'm not going to use these laws. I'm just going to do everything different. You're going to use these laws, but I'm going to do everything different. So I'm just going to do this and then everything will be created. No, that's not what science, what we can observe from what's happening. So life was created in this way. Life was created based on a project.
The Spiritist book also does say no one knows for sure exactly when human beings first appeared. And I would guess that scientists today would say, yes, that's true, but we know a lot more now than we did before. What we know now, based upon the evidence that's available through fossils, is that the account, as it's described in Genesis, is a myth.
Now, the spirits also tell us that we didn't have our first incarnation on earth, that we came to earth when already the physical body similar to what we have today already existed. We did not, as spirits, did not come from the monkeys, as they say, right? We, as physical body, yes. But when we first incarnated here on earth, we were already Homo sapiens sapiens, as they called, right? So the spirits that were here before us were different spirits. The population of the earth today are spirits that came later.
It took a long time, and evolution is part of it. Evolution is definitely something that needs time to get to a point, right? Even with our machines, for us to have iPads, iPhones, whatever, these cameras that we are using right now at this moment, small cameras, like it fits in our hands. How big were cameras when they were created? Could we have these small cameras at the time? No, we didn't have the technology. We didn't have the time to mature the knowledge, to let the knowledge sink. And when knowledge sinks, then we can step on that knowledge and grow based on that knowledge. That's how we do it. How does God do it? Same way.
Emmanuel talks about it on the way to the light, right? The spirits that come from Capella, that the four big groups of spirits that incarnated in Egypt, in India, in Persia, and I don't remember the fourth one, which are spirits, that came from more evolved worlds.
What is evolution? Evolution is this idea that because we relate to the world we live in, we learn from what we are experiencing, and we are moving forward on that level. So we adapt to survive, we adapt to grow, we adapt to be better.
That people developed in different places at different times. But again, one would have to supplement that information, I think, with what scientists now understand based upon more recent research.
So when we look at the Bible, when we look at the story of Adam and Eve, a lot of people still up to this day really take that story as a literal story, as something that really happened, and that is exactly how the universe was created. And in Spiritism, we look at this as something that is very important. It is something, we look at this, looking at it and saying, this needs to be studied, this needs to be researched, but this was not written by scientists. But is it scientific true that 6,000 years ago, one man populated the entire earth in 6,000 years?
Well, what the Spiritist book emphasizes, and again, its point of view was based upon what was known back then, 1857, 1858, is that it seriously doubted that human beings only existed 4,000 years before Christ, and that Adam was the first person on the planet.
You cannot take it literally, right? The idea of Adam and Eve, the original first man and woman on earth, is a figurative idea. It's an idea of the first colonizers as spirits that came to earth, right?
The idea of Adam and Eve and all that creation that we see in the Genesis is, and Kardec mentions that in that part of the Spirit's book as well, is how that people that wrote that story, or those stories, or those people who wrote those stories, could wrap their minds around the idea of creation. And we have like the 6 days of creation, before that, and all those experiences. When we look back with scientists today, we can clearly see that that knowledge that's there spread into 6 days of creation, it can be easily relatable to these, what we call these days, the geological eras.
And of course, we now have lots, or a significant amount of evidence from paleontologists that human beings have been on the planet for easily, I think it's now around 4 million years, is about as far back as it goes.
The idea of the lost paradise is also figurative. It's the idea that we came from a more evolved planet and came to this planet that is primitive, or beginning of the world of trials and expiation. So we really lost the paradise that we used to live and came to live in this very difficult planet. So you see that Spiritism help us understand these figurative ideas that the religion taught us throughout the ages.
So the existence of Adam, it may have been a man. There might have been a man called Adam, or whatever the name is. Likely, it was the explanation of those people at that time for how life came to be on earth. So if there was an Adam, which is probably not one man, but a culture, a group of people.
And you see the evolution also, the jump in evolution when the spirits start incarnating here. So we move from a society that doesn't organize itself, that lives nomad society, to a society that starts to settle, starts to build houses and build communities, and start with agriculture. All these things started with these people, the spirits from more evolved planets start incarnated on Earth, because they brought this knowledge.
It's awfully presumptuous of us human beings here on Earth to assume that we're the only ones in the entire universe that are alive, and that this planet is the only planet, which is a tiny speck in the universe, is the only place that has life.
humanity is imbued or infused with this idea that we are not alone in the universe, right? If we go back in time, we will see people thinking about lives in other planets. You know, all these, any kind of philosophy in the past would look at the skies and would say that there were people coming from other planets here.
I think what Spiritism does in the Spirit's book is kind of provide an understanding that the universe is so large and so vast, there must be something else out there that has life and would function in a different way.
Naturally, when we talk about life in other planets, people immediately jump to the conclusion that we are talking about life as we see it here in other planet. And that's one common, I would say, misconception, that when Spiritism talk about lives in other planets, Spiritism is actually talking about maybe life as we know it here, but not only life in other shapes, right?
It gives one example where, for instance, we on Earth depend on the sun for our light, but maybe another planet depends on electricity more, and that sort of thing.
Kardec even goes to say at one point, which is anecdotal, but it's really interesting the way he puts it, say, look, if we breathe on air, we've never seen a fish, and then we put our heads inside water and try to breathe there, and say, no, nothing could survive here. Because we only take our life as if it's the only life possible. There is life in other planets. I'm pretty sure about it, right? Even Carl Sagan, one of the greatest scientists, or the one that decided to put this series called Cosmos, he creates this equation where he puts like these huge numbers to try to calculate if there's life in other planets. And he says, even if we put like some of the biggest numbers that we know and the knowledge that we know, the number of planets, I don't remember the number that he comes up to, but he says, the number of planets that could have life is so big that there's no way that there's no life in other planets.
If we still need to continue reincarnating at that time, we will start reincarnating on another planet. Now, Earth is moving from a planet of trials and atonements to a planet of regeneration. So the spirits that are going to start incarnating here on Earth from now on will be more evolved spirits. And we can only imagine that in another 500,000, a million years, maybe Earth will be a happy planet.
There might be more universes around there that we don't know. And that's one of the other ways to explain what Spiritism says when we talk about life in other planets. Or there are many mentions or many houses in the universe as Jesus, in the house of my Father, as Jesus points out to us.